Traditionally, mass communications research has conceptualized the process of communication in terms of a circulation circuit or loop. This model has been criticized for its linearity, for its concentration on the level of message exchange, and for the absence of a structured conception of the different moments as a complex structure of relations. But it is also possible and useful to think of this process in terms of a structure produced and sustained through the articulation of linked but distinctive moments: production, circulation, distribution, reproduction. This would be to think of the process as a complex structure in dominance, sustained through the articulation of connected practices, each of which, however, retains its distinctiveness and has its own specific modality, its own forms and conditions of existence. Good sense appears to have prevailed at last. With a fresh set of draft rules to replace last year's poorly conceived ones, the center has sought to withdraw the ban on sale of cattle for slaughter in animal markets. The draft rules are now open for comments and suggestions. When the Union Ministry for Environment, Forests and Climate Change notified the rules under the Prevention of the Cruelty to Animals Act on May 23, 2017, there was concern that in the name of preventing cruelty to animals and regulating livestock markets, the government was surreptitiously throttling the cattle trade and furthering the BJP's cow protection agenda. The rules were criticized for restricting legitimate animal trade and interfering with dietary habits. When that happens, staff will help the person strung out now a little stressed fish their drugs out of the rubbish. On their way out, they might have a blood test, their first dental checkup in years, or just a hot cup of Milo. We enable people to inject in the center because that's what they do. The medical director, Nico Clark, tells Guardian Australia during a recent visit to the North Richmond Community Health Centre. The majority are dependent on their substances. The purpose is not to be the place that facilitates injection the purpose is to keep people alive. Victorian government rejects criticism of drug injecting room, saying it is saving lives. The centre is a response to a coroner's report that noted the heroin-related deaths in the area in 2016. Now scientists have determined just what's genetically missing in store-bought tomatoes. The researchers honed in on two transcription factors. Transcription factors are proteins that control the expression of genes. In this case, they're necessary for the production of chloroplasts, which allow sunlight to generate sugars and other compounds. Darker green tomato fruit expresses genes that make possible increased photosynthesis, and so the fruits are able to produce more sugars for a tastier end product. But typical supermarket tomatoes, which had been bred to all turn light green at the same time, were also accidentally bred with reduced chloroplasts, and thus reduced sugar content. The research was published in the journal Science. The scientists say understanding the genes involved in better flavor could enable growers to offer tastier supermarket varieties. So that when you say tomato, I can say tomato or tomato instead of bleach. Researchers enlisted 95 volunteers. Their sleep patterns were measured to make sure that lack of rest didn't distort the results. Those who got drunk on bourbon reported worse hangovers, headaches, nausea, and general discomfort. And they performed worse on tasks that required careful attention for decision making. They didn't sleep any worse than vodka drinkers, though. Here's why bourbon might hurt more. Many alcoholic beverages contain byproducts of fermentation called congeners, complex organic compounds that in large doses can have toxic effects. And darker distilled drinks and wines generally have more of these congeners than do lighter ones. Bourbon, in fact, has 37 times more than vodka does, which, the researchers note, may add to the hangover effect. So if you're worried about a dark hangover cloud in the morning, maybe stick to lighter drinks tonight. Insects have been an important part of the human diet for thousands of years. So why has insect eating died out in the developed world? Stuart Hine, an entomologist at the Natural History Museum in London, says it's a cultural thing. Insects are seen as dirty and as carriers of disease. Despite this, a decade ago, insect eating seemed to be making a comeback with the publication of a number of insect recipe books. Edible, a London-based company, supplies products such as chocolate-covered ants and toasted leafcutter ants. Perhaps as we become aware of the sentience of higher animals, insects will become the protein of choice in centuries to come. On April 6th, Hine will give a talk on edible insects at London's Natural History Museum and offer some unusual snacks. The process of delegation comprises the decision to delegate, the briefing, and the follow-up. At each of these points, anticipate the potential problems. When you delegate, you are not delegating the right to perform an action, you are delegating the right to make decisions. It is important to be flexible, as the person to whom you delegate may have a better and faster way of completing a job than you. Overall responsibility for a delegated task remains with you. It is helpful to others if you can provide constructive positive feedback on their performance. Most of us are scared of open conflict and avoid it if we can. And there is a risk to expressing and working through conflict. If the working through involves harsh words and name-calling, people feel deeply hurt and relationships can be damaged. Sometimes permanently. Some group members may be afraid that if they really express their anger, they may go out of control and become violent, or they may do this. These fears can be very real and based on experience.